In a village by the tall baobab tree, an elder's voice and whisper sets us free.
In the small village of Akuru, nestled deep within the African savannah, the elders often warn children, do not leave your clothes on the line after sunset. It seemed like just another superstition to the younger ones, but to the elders it was a rule steeped in cautionary tales and grim history. 13-year-old Efwa always thought the warnings were silly. To her, clothes were just fabric, and the stories about spirits and curses were nothing more than an attempt to control the younger ones. One evening, she played with her friends until the setting sun dyed the sky a fiery orange. By the time she returned home, her clothes were still flapping on the line, forgotten in her rush to join her friends earlier. As she gathered the garments, her grandmother Mama Adowa spotted her. Her frail figure cast a long shadow against the dimming light. "Efwa!" she barked, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and anger. "Do you want to call the forest spirits to our home?" Efwa scoffed, rolling her eyes. "They are just clothes, Mama. What could possibly happen?" Mama Adowa's face grew dark. She grabbed Efwa's arm, her grip surprisingly firm for someone her age. "Come inside, child. Let me tell you a story before it is too late." Years ago, Mama Adowa began. A young man named Atta lived in Akuru. He was known for his charm and wit, but also for his arrogance. Atta often mocked the traditions, believing himself untouchable. One fateful evening, he left his finest tunic on the line, even as the elders warned him of the consequences. That night as he slept, Atta woke to the sound of whispers outside his hut. Peeking through the cracks in his door, he saw figures moving near his closed line. They were not human, but shadowy forms with glowing eyes. The spirits were inspecting his tunic, stroking it with long, bony fingers. Atta froze in terror as one of the spirits slipped into his tunic, his shapeless form shifting, taking on his exact likeness. The other spirits cackled as the doppelganger walked away, his movement eerily similar to Atta's. When morning came, the villagers were confused. Two Attas roamed the village. One was warm and familiar, the other was cold and unsettling. The spirit had stolen not just Atta's appearance, but also his voice and mannerisms. Over time, the villagers couldn't tell them apart. The real Atta grew desperate, pleading with the elders to help, but it was too late. The spirit had taken his essence, leaving him a hollow shell. One day, both Attas disappeared into the forest and neither was ever seen again. "The clothes you leave outside after sunset," Mama Adowa whispered, "become invitations. They hold your scent, your energy. And the spirits, my child, they are always watching, waiting for a chance to enter our world." As the night deepened, a strange breeze swept through the village, rustling the clothes Efwa had taken down. For the first time, she noticed how the shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally, how the silence of the night wasn't as comforting as it once was. Mama Adowa leaned closer, her voice almost a whisper. "The forest spirits don't need much to cross over Efwa. Just a single garment is enough." Suddenly, a loud thud came from outside the hut. Both Efwa and Mama Adowa froze, their eyes darting to the window. The clothesline was empty, yet a single piece of fabric lay crumpled on the ground, moving as though it had a life of its own. "Did you bring in all the clothes, Efwa?" Mama Adowa asked, her voice trembling. Efwa's heart sank. She realized she hadn't. There was still one piece left behind, the scarf her late mother had given her. The wind howled and the shadows outside seemed to ripple as something was coming closer. Efwa's chest tightened as her grandmother's question hung in the air. She struggled to speak, her voice barely a whisper. I left Mama's scarf." Mama Adowa's face turned pale, her aged hands trembling as she gripped her walking stick. "Efwa, that scarf carries your mother's spirit. The forest spirits will be drawn to it like moths to a flame. Outside, the wind grew fiercer, carrying it a low, mournful wail that sounded like 100 whispers combined. The crumpled fabric on the ground began to rise and fall as if something unseen was breathing through it. "We must get it back before they fully claim it," Mama Adua said, her voice resolute despite the fear in her eyes. She handed Efwa a small gourd filled with ash. "This is protection from the ancestors. Scatter it in a circle if you are in danger, and whatever you do, do not speak if you see them. They mimic voices to confuse their prey." The two stepped outside, the night darker than Efwa had ever seen. Shadows danced unnaturally under the flickering lantern Mama Adua carried. The scarf, now billowing gently in the wind, seemed to pulse with an eerie light. As they approached, the air grew colder and the whispers became clearer. Efwa could make out faint sounds, her name, spoken in her mother's voice. "Efwa, come closer, it is me." Her heart ached at the sound, but Mama Adua's grip on her arm tightened. "It is not your mother. Remember what I told you. Do not speak." Efwa nodded, tears stinging her eyes as the voice grew louder, more desperate. "Efwa, my child, why won't you answer me? Don't you miss me?" They reached the scarf and Mama Adua began chanting under her breath, a prayer Efwa didn't recognize. As she bent to pick up the scarf, the wind suddenly stopped. The night fell eerily silent, the kind of silence that made Efwa's skin crawl. A low growl emerged from the darkness, followed by the appearance of a figure, a woman, draped in tattered garments that flowed like mist. Her face was beautiful but wrong, her features too perfect, her eyes glowing like embers. "Give it back," the figure demanded, her voice a mix of Efwa's mother's and something else, something guttural and inhuman. Mama Adua stood still, clutching the scarf to her chest. "This belongs to the living. You have no claim here." The figure's smile widened, revealing rows of sharp, glistening teeth. "Everything left in the night is ours. You know the old ways, Adua, or have you forgotten?" Efwa watched in horror as more figures emerged from the shadows, their forms shifting and flickering like candle flames. They surrounded them, their whispers growing louder, overlapping, suffocating. "Scatter the ash," Mama Adua cried, her voice strained. Efwa fumbled with the gourd, her fingers shaking so violently she nearly dropped it. As she opened it and threw the ash in a circle around them, the spirits recoiled, hissing and wailing, but the woman at the center remained, her glowing eyes fixed on Efwa. "You left the scarf, child," the woman said, her voice softening but piercing. "You invited us, and now we cannot leave without a trade." Efwa's leg felt like they would give way. What do you want?" she stammered, forgetting her grandmother's warning in panic. The spirit surged forward at her words, their laughter echoing through the night. Mama Adua gasped, grabbing Efwa and pulling her close. "You have spoken. They will twist your words now. Hold on to me, child. Do not let go." The woman grinned, her voice towering over them. "We want her voice," she said, pointing at Efwa. "Or perhaps a shadow." Before Efwa could respond, the ground beneath them began to shift, as if the earth itself was alive. The shadows of the spirit stretched towards them, coiling and twisting like vines, trying to breach the protective circle. Mama Adua's chants grew louder, more urgent, but the spirits only seemed to grow stronger. The woman's laughter rang out, filling the air with an unbearable chill. "Choose, child," she said, her voice echoing. "Your voice or your shadow? One will stay with us forever." The night seemed to hold its breath as Efwa's vision blurred, the world around her spinning with dread and despair. Efwa's knees buckled, her breath itching as the spirits closing. The woman's eyes glowed brighter, her grin stretching unnaturally wide. "Choose quickly, child," she repeated, her tone mocking. "Time slips faster in the world of the unseen." Mama Adua's grip on Efwa tightened, her knuckles white as she whispered, Do not speak, Efwa. No matter what they say, stay silent. But the woman wasn't finished. She tilted her head, her voice softening, becoming impossibly sweet. Don't be afraid, my dear. Giving up your shadow is painless. You won't even miss it. She stepped closer, her flowing garments almost brushing the ash barrier. Or your voice. Imagine a world of quiet. Peaceful, isn't it? Efwa's heart pounded. Her voice or her shadow. What kind of choice was that? The thought of losing her voice made her throat ache. But her shadow, it was a part of her, something she had never even thought about until now. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of the impossible, while the spirit's whispers crawled under her skin. Suddenly, one of the shadows surged forward, pressing against the ash barrier. The protective circle flared with light, holding her back. But the strain showed in Mama Adua's trembling frame. The ash won't hold them forever, she muttered, sweat beading her brow. Efwa's gaze darted to the scarf in her grandmother's hand. Could it be the key to ending this nightmare? Grandma, she whispered, her voice trembling. What if we destroy the scarf? Mama Adua's eyes widened in horror. No! The scarf carries your mother's blessing. To destroy it will sever her protection from you, and it would only anger the spirits further. The woman's laughter boomed, shaking the very ground beneath their feet. Yes, listen to your elder. Destroying it won't save you, little one. In fact, it will doom you faster. Efwa looked at her grandmother, whose face was etched with fear and determination. Then what can we do? She whispered, desperation creeping into her voice. Mama Adua hesitated, her gaze flickering to the spirits closing in. Finally, she whispered, there is one way, but it comes with its own price. The woman tilted her head, intrigued. Oh, do tell, Adua. It's been ages since we have had a proper bargain. Ignoring her, Mama Adua reached into her robes and pulled out a small wooden carving, an ancestral totem, worn smooth from years of use. She pressed it into Efwa's hands. Take this, she said, her voice trembling. It will anchor you to the living world. But to use it, you must call on the ancestors, and they will demand a sacrifice of their own. Efwa stared at the totem, her fingers brushing over the intricate carvings. She could feel a warmth emanating from it, a pulse of energy that felt alive. What kind of sacrifice? She asked, her voice barely audible. Mama Adua didn't answer. Her silence was louder than the spirit's whispers. The woman laughed again, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. Oh, Adua, still clinging to the old ways? How quaint. But do you really think the ancestors care for this child? They will take far more than she's prepared to give. Efwa's hands trembled as she gripped the totem, her mind spinning. The spirits pressed closer, their shadows writhing and clawing at the barrier. Time was running out. She could feel it in the way the air seemed to grow heavier, suffocating. Choose, child, the woman hissed, her voice now dripping with malice. Your shadow, your voice, or perhaps your soul. The words sent a chill down Efwa's spine. She glanced at Mama Adua, who was chanting fiercely, her voice cracking under the string. The ash circle began to dim, the light flickering like a dying flame. Do it, Efwa, Mama Adua cried. Call the ancestors before it is too late. Efwa clutched the totem tightly, her heart pounding as she closed her eyes and whispered the ancient words her grandmother had taught her long ago, words she never thought she would need. The air grew still, heavy with anticipation, and then the ground beneath them rumbled, a deep, resonant hum that seemed to come from the earth itself. A blinding light erupted from the totem, forcing the spirits to retreat with agonized scream. But the woman stood firm, her grin faltering only slightly. You think they will save you? Her voice venomous. The ancestors always take their due, child. Are you ready to pay the price? Efwa's eyes snapped open, glowing faintly with the totem's energy. The light surrounding her swirled like a storm, and she felt the presence of something vast and ancient pressing against her mind. The whispers of the spirits were gone, replaced by the deep echoing voices of the ancestors. Efwa, they intoned, Their voice is a chorus of power. You have called upon us. What will you offer in return? The woman smirked, folding her arms as if watching an amusing show. Go on, little one. Tell them, what are you willing to lose? Efwa's mouth went dry. Her voice faltered as she tried to answer, the weight of the moment crashing down on her. She could feel the ancestors waiting, their presence both protective and overwhelming. What will you give, child? They repeated, their voices rumbling like distant thunder. The spirits circled, waiting, their laughter echoing in the darkness as Efwa stood frozen, caught between the living and the dead. Efwa's heart raised as the ancestors' voices echoed, demanding her choice. The totem in her hands pulsed like a heartbeat, connecting her to something far greater than herself. She looked at Mama Adua, whose face was lined with worry and hope. Then she turned to the woman, the twisted spirit, whose grin faltered for the first time. Efwa closed her eyes and spoke, her voice steady despite the fear constricting her chest. I will offer my selfishness, my ignorance. Take away my pride and replace it with wisdom, so I will never disrespect the ways of the ancestors again. The spirit eased, recoiling as the ancestors' presence grew stronger. The air vibrated with power, and the ancestors' voices boomed in approval. You have chosen wisely, child. Arrogance blinds the young, but humility opens the eyes. Let it be so. The totem glowed brightly, and Efwa felt a rush of energy surging through her, as if the wisdom of generations flowed into her very soul. The ash circle fled, creating a barrier so strong that the spirit scattered, screaming in frustration. Only the woman remained, a figure flickering like a dying flame. The ancestors turned their attention to her. You have no claim here. Return to your world and trouble this family no more. The woman's glowing eyes dimmed, and she let out a piercing shriek before vanishing into the shadows. The night returned to its natural stillness. The oppressive weight of the spirits lifted. Mama Adua fell to her knees, clutching Efwa tightly. You did well, child, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. You honored the ancestors and protected our family. When dawn broke, Efwa felt like she was seeing the world through new eyes. The sun's warmth seemed brighter, the chirping of the birds sweeter. She sat with Mama Adua as they folded the scarf and placed it in a special box, a symbol of her mother's love and the protection of the ancestors. The elders of the village gathered that morning, listening as Mama Adua and Efwa shared their harrowing experience. The story spread quickly, and the lesson was clear. The traditions of the elders were not mere superstitions, but wisdom rooted in deep truths. Traditions and warnings passed down through generations often have deep meanings and are meant to protect, not restrict. Efwa's decision to give up her pride and ignorance shows that recognizing one's flaws is the first step towards growth and enlightenment. The story reminds us that the world is interconnected, and respecting the unseen forces around us ensures harmony in our lives. From that day forward, no one in Akuru questioned the rule about leaving clothes outside after sunset, and Efwa, now wiser and humble, became a storyteller, ensuring that the lessons of our experience were passed down to future generations.
In jubilant smiles, old spirits survive. Through the pixel rivers, tradition streams, children's faces light with dreams. From Kenya's plains to Congo's greens, the past and present brightly gleams. Into the future their light we